it's Ryan from 2minutetennis.net, and in this video, I'm going to show you what you can learn from the Diego Schwartzman forehand to help improve your forehand. Now, make sure you stick around to the end of the video when I demonstrate this all in front of the camera. First, make sure you are following court level tennis. Incredible footage, and yes, it's all this type of footage where it's all court level to the side and behind the pros. It's unreal. Please follow them. I have put their link in the description below. So the first thing is the proper split step timing. This is critical. This is not something that changes from situation to situation. The pros split step after the opponent strikes the ball. They are landing their split step after the opponent hits. So let's just zoom in. There is contact right there with his hitting partner. And you can notice that Schwartzman is not split stepped. He's even close to split stepping. Now he lands and the ball is way on its way to him. So make sure that the timing of your split step is that you take off with your split step around the time your opponent hits or just before, so that you're in the air as they hit and then you're going to land after. That synchronizes your feet with your head when you're recognizing where the ball goes with when your feet hit the ground, and you can actually react faster. The second thing is the way he turns. I love the way he turns for a forehand. It's very reminiscent of Andre Agassi. A couple things here. First, notice he immediately gets his body to the side. So here we're looking at his profile. So his chest is facing off to the side. Another thing, I can circle both hands. This is what I call with my students, in-person students. On court, I teach them 2 high fives, like you're giving somebody 2 high fives. You're reaching up to your right, like there's a really tall person over here. Oh, well, nothing against Diego Schwartzman, but there's a really tall person over here, and he's going to give him 2 high fives, right? I didn't really mean that against him with his height, but, it worked. So you want to turn like you're giving 2 high fives. You'll notice that the tip of his racket is above his head. And for disclosure here, I'm about the height of Diego Schwartzman as well. And I love how his racket is closed. This is so good. When the racket is closed like this, it helps shorten your swing. If you're someone who has been told that your swing is too large in the back, then film yourself from the back view and make sure that the tip of the racket is higher than your head. You can even think of having your hand around, neck level, your hitting hand. But see if you can turn with your racket face closed. Let me draw that better. There we go. And have your racket closed. That can help keep the racket more on the hitting side of the body and not allow the racket to get too big. So the next thing, his legs. He sinks down into his legs beautifully. Let me use this angle tool here. He gets tremendous knee bend. And this is something that's so important because we want to use our legs to press down against the ground. When you press down against the ground, it helps propel you up and help you explode up into the ball. And the energy is then just transferred into the racket and then thus into the ball. So if we take a line and we draw it across the top of his head, that shows us how low he is. Now watch, when he presses against the ground, look where he is at contact. So his head has definitely gone up probably an entire foot. So this is an explosion of the legs into the ball. I mean, there are times where keeping the knees bent is a good idea, especially if the ball comes really deep near you and you're taking it off the rise or you're leaning back and you're just trying to control the situation. But when the ball is slower and it's bouncing out in front of you and you really want to use your legs into this to get explosion, film yourself, see how much knee bend you can get, and then lift up with your body, press down against the ground, and that energy transfer goes all the way into the body, through the racket, into the ball, and it's amazing how much speed and spin and depth you'll create by using your legs. Now, when he was bending his knees, you can see his racket is closed. This is really important. Now, the amount that you close your racket is going to vary from grip to grip and from person to person, but you do want to close your racket face. If we go further along here in the forehand, you'll notice that his racket is closed about 45 degrees, and he has a tremendous racket angle between his arm and the racket, with the butt of the racket pointing at the ball. This is a really classic position that coaches all around the world teach. It's that get the butt cap pointing at the ball. He's so loose in his motion that when his hips turn, you can see as his racket falls, as the racket goes down, his hips begin turning. And that really sets the racket angle. So watch this again. As his racket is beginning to drop, he doesn't have that severe wrist angle. You can see that. But as his left arm starts to move out of the way, his upper body turns, lower body turns, as everything starts to open up. Remember, his hands were close together here at the beginning. Now his hands are separating because now his upper body is turning as the racket's dropping. That creates like a whipping action and the racket gets pulled through contact. That's what's setting that wrist angle. So you don't set this wrist angle, on purpose. You're loose enough in your hand that when your hips turn and everything starts to rotate, that angle sets itself. Now that angle is so important because that's the angle that you're going to have at contact. If you don't have that angle, then you're going to continue hitting the ball left. This is why beginners, if they're right-handed, will continually hit the ball left because they don't have a racket angle between the racket and the arm. And their racket and their arm are pretty much in a straight line, which is why the ball goes off to the left. You want that wrist angle to be created as the hips turn so that when you contact out in front, while you're going from below the ball to above the ball, imparting spin, that the strings actually face your target. Now, speaking of, the contact and hitting spin, look where his non-hitting hand is. His non-hitting hand is around head level. I absolutely love this. This is what you see Tommy Haas do. This is what you see Victoria Azarenka do. I love it that their left hand or their non-hitting hand is up. It's almost like they're waving. I actually recently taught a student of mine, I said, hey, wave to your wife as you're hitting the ball. And it instantly improved his forehand because his arm was dropping. You don't want your non-hitting arm dropping as you hit the ball. You can see Diego, as he moves his non-hitting hand out of the way, watch his hand rise. So his hand is rising as he's hitting the ball. This helps you turn your hips. If your non-hitting arm is dropping, it's going to be very difficult to turn your hips, and you're not going to get the racket speed. And you're also not going to get that angle, as we've talked about, how the hip turn creates that angle in the wrist. And there's a little lag, just a little bit in the forehand. And I can show you, he's not making this big lag like he's Federer or Nadal. Definitely not that big of a lag. But he definitely has the type of lag that you'll see in like a Del Potro, where there's a little bit of lag in that wrist and forehand. And again, that's set because the hips turn. And then he finishes, and you can see if I draw that circle again. Now, he's not catching the racket, but his hands are close. And I actually teach people to catch the racket. It just ensures that their hand was up here, that the non-hitting hand was up here as you're striking the ball. And then I just ask people to catch the racket there just to make sure that they were doing it. All right, let's go in front of the camera, and I'm going to teach you everything from beginning to end. So first, I've got to say, I am absolutely loving making this video. So if you are enjoying this video and you've learned something, then please make sure you hit the subscribe and notification bell, hit the like button, and even comment below what it was that you learned in this video that you didn't know previously. So first, the split step. You want to make this move as you're rallying. So you're hitting and you make this move right here. The reason you make that move is so that you can explode in any direction because your knees are bent and then you explode that way. But it's also a braking mechanism. So if you're running to the net and you're running fast, you want to make this move. So if there's a ball that goes over your head, you can run back and get a lob. If it's a passing shot, you can change direction to get that ball. But it's not just important that you do it. It's important when you do it. You want to be in the air as the opponent hits and then land just after. That synchronizes your brain and your feet. Brain reacting where the ball is going with your feet hitting the ground, and then you react right off of that bounce. You bounce and then you go exactly where you want to go. Film yourself from the back and stop the video while you're rallying with someone. Stop the video when they are hitting the ball and see if you're in the air. You want to be in the air as they hit and then land just after. Now the second thing, when you turn on your forehand, you want to turn high. Your body turning to the side, hands like you're giving someone 2 high fives, tip of the racket higher than your head, and you'll notice with Diego, his racket was closed. Andre Agassi, one of my favorite players growing up, he turned this way, and he's known for just gorgeous ground strokes, incredible return to serve. It helps to shorten the swing. You won't have typically a giant, huge swing, and there are exceptions, of course. I mean, Nadal turns open like this, and then he turns closed with a big lag. So I'm not saying there aren't exceptions. I'm trying to help you, the amateur player, improve your forehand. So try turning like Diego, where the racket is closed. When the racket is closed slightly, that makes it for a great swing that's going to stay more on the hitting side, and it's not going to go more on the backside. If you're someone who's got a swing that's getting too large, try turning and keeping the racket closed the whole time. Now, this is when we saw Diego really bend this right knee. His weight was on this knee, and actually his weight was on that knee the whole time. He actually, when he hit that ball, his left foot moved backward, which is not a bad thing. It's about rotating. We want to rotate our body in order to be able to swing that racket through contact. It's important that we're turning our hips as we strike the ball. But he bent his knee, but he didn't just bend it and then stay down there. He bent it, and as the racket dropped, he exploded up with his body. That's what set that wrist angle with the butt cap pointing at the ball and his racket closed. You want to get into these checkpoints. You should be filming yourself, knowing what you look like, and shadowing the way I am here in my basement. You want to be shadowing your swing so that you can check to see if you're doing what Diego was doing. Now, he would rotate his body as he did this, and one of the markers of this is his non-hitting hand, his left hand, was up here. I actually tell my students, as you're hitting the ball, wave to your opponent. Because a lot of amateurs, they hit the ball and their arm drops. I would say more than half of all recreational players in the world, as they hit the ball, their arm is dropping. And I want you to raise this hand. When your arm drops, it impedes hip turn because the racket's going this way, your left arm, if you're right hand, going this way, and you end up hugging yourself. And the hips don't know who to listen to. When the left arm, or the non-hitting arm, moves out of the way, and it moves up, it facilitates hip turn. When it drops, that's when you can't turn your hips, and you're not going to get the wrist angle that we talked about when we looked at Schwartzman. So it's really important that this arm is rising, and you should film yourself from the back and see your non-hitting hand over your non-hitting shoulder, higher than non-hitting shoulder as you're striking the ball. He's swinging from low to high. Obviously not just straight up, there's forward swing as well. And then he actually finished like this, where his left hand was down here. But since it was here, I actually teach my students to just catch the racket there, just as an easy way to make sure that the non-hitting hand was up and then back to the ready position. So film yourself. Look for the split step, that you're timed properly. Look for turning with both hands up. I also call it the Frankenstein with my students, like you're turning like Frankenstein. Yeah, right? So you're going to turn like this. Racket tip is up. My racket's closed. As the racket falls, by the way, Topspin Pro, incredible product. You need to get one for at-home practice. You're going to drop, the knees bend, you turn your hips, the non-hitting hand is rising. That's going to set the wrist angle. Racket's closed so that I can brush, and then I want you to catch up high in your left hand. If you practice these ideas that you just learned from Diego Schwartzman, there's no doubt you're going to gain confidence, win more matches, and play much better tennis. This is Ryan Reedy from 2minutetennis.net. You got this.